So, 1,000 people search for something on Google, 300 of them actually clicked through to a website. The other 700 got what they needed and moved on. If you run a website, that number should bother you a little. It bothers me at least. That's what today is all about. Not panicking about it, and definitely not another list of geo tips someone scraped off LinkedIn. Today is about what a machine actually sees on your website. The person who knows best is Slobodan Manić, sunny to most of us. He's a developer who ended up deep in experimentation, which is a strange combination, but exactly the right one for this. The last year and a half, he's been running real sites through his own audit, looking for what makes a page legible to a machine. He found patterns. He's going to share those patterns, and then we're going to put some live, famous brands through the same test. You live with the tools to do it yourself, and that's the part that matters more than anything I say up here. Sunny, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the wonderful intro. And yeah, the weird jump from developer to experimentation. But I guess everyone jumps to experimentation from something completely different, or most people I have interviewed on the podcast. So every jump into experimentation is a weird jump. I'm looking at the list of attendees. I see some familiar people there. Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending. Thank you for trusting us with your time. And thank you to Convert for making this possible. Yeah, we'll talk about uh, what's changing online really. And you'll see this in the webinar, in the demos. It's not the same internet we had 5 years ago and 10 years ago, because everything before was you search for something, Google tells you go there, read about it yourself, make a decision yourself, make up your mind yourself, and maybe you look for third-party reviews and all that, but every decision has to be made by yourself. Now there's this weird thing between the brand and the customer that is clouding their judgment, for better or worse. And let's talk about that. How do you pass your information from your brand, from your website, from whatever you're doing online through that new cloud or layer between you and the customer, and how you make sure that it reaches your customer? So today I'll talk about two things: defining your identity and having a strong entity online and how you do that, and how to structure your website and your online presence in a way that passes through this layer. So yeah, it's not exciting, it's not glamorous, but it's something that should have been done 15 years ago. So we can start. Okay, let's talk about this. Like, what does it really mean to prepare yourself, your website, your brand for AI and AI agents? There's a lot of talk about building agents. There's a lot of talk about what the agents could do someday. Well, one thing they already do is browse the internet on behalf of a human or just independently. And how do we prepare for something like this? How do you make sure your website is what the agents expect and need? And this will not be a typical AI webinar. I will not be hyping things. I'll try to keep it factual. I will show you a few things that absolutely matter today, and then you will be able to understand why your website is understood or not understood by AI systems today, and what you can do about fixing that. And the story, just like any story with me, starts with me trying to buy a pair of running shoes. This was about 18 months ago. There was a running shoe that was launched that was the best-selling launch of a running shoe, I believe, of all time. And I wanted to test if an AI system can tell me where I can buy those shoes. Because at that time, this was around February, March 2025, a few of these systems existed. OpenAI had computer using agent. All of the LLMs were able to fetch pages from the internet. RAG was very much a thing of part of how they respond to any question. So I tried to do something like this. I just asked Gemini to find online shops in the country where I live that have these shoes in stock in this color. And it sure did give me a few. And by the way, this is recreation of this prompt because it didn't save a prompt from 18 months ago, but it was exactly the same, the answer. And the problem with this one is that it doesn't list official website anywhere. So I wanted to understand why that is the case. And this is how I started digging, and this is how I spent most of the last 18 months trying to understand this. This is what triggered it. I wanted to see why this page, which is the official page on the official website for this shoe, was not recommended by an AI. And if you look at the page, it's not easy to understand what is happening, because there's a product name, it matches what is searched. There's a price right here. There are colors, there's everything, there are sizes. If you scroll down the page, you can see a bunch of photos. You can see a lot more of these technical details of the shoe. There's description, details, which technologies are used, a whole lot of good content. The problem with all this content and sizing availability and everything else is that when you disable JavaScript on this page, and that's easy to do in Chrome DevTools, you can just open DevTools and Command-Shift-P, disable JavaScript. I did that. I want to show you what this page looks like with JavaScript disabled because it's very telling. This is that same page without JavaScript. And you can see there are a few things are missing. There's no menu, but also the sizes, they're not real. It's all AAA placeholders. When the page loads inside the user's browser, they get replaced by actual sizes and actual availability. So this is why an AI does not understand. And I'm not just making an assumption. I had some more follow-up prompts. I had Gemini, again, which sizes of this shoe, giving it the exact URL, are available. And it literally said, I cannot see available sizes, but it was able to tell me what the price is and what the product name is. Claude, same thing. Which sizes are available? I pull the page, but the size grid is rendered by JavaScript after load. In the raw HTML, every slot comes back as an empty placeholder. Now, this is the problem. Obviously, this is the problem because, yes, you're not going to be buying shoes this way just yet. But if you're researching a SaaS product or anything that you need for your work, of course you'll use AI to do the research. And of course, if it cannot fetch the pricing, if it cannot fetch any relevant information for a product that is being researched, that product is probably not going to make it to the end report, or maybe it's going to be a footnote. By the way, almost forgot to tell you, I did buy them. Of course, there's a hole in this one. I did buy them. I had to go to the shop to get them. So shopping online, not a thing in 2025. We're getting closer, but there are these silly things that prevent websites from being readable by machines. I'll talk about that today. And one more thing before we get into all those details, because I think there's a structural change underneath everything that we are discussing today and everything that's happening online. For 30 years, this is how the internet mostly worked. It was your page, your ad, whatever, and it was your audience's eyes. If they search for something, search was just a, hey, go there and look at that page and read it yourself, and then it just got out of the way. That is now changing because now there is a layer sitting between your customer and your brand. And that layer is everything that happens in assistants, answer engines, and people are asking that layer about you instead of coming to ask you directly or check your website directly or read reviews on other websites directly. So that layer is what reads your website, creates a picture about your brand, and then decides what you are, decides whether to mention you and whether to mention you in a positive way, and then speaks about you. And this is a conversation you are not a part of directly, because that conversation between the customer and this layer is what is shaping the customer's opinion. And that layer is growing and getting thicker, and I will show you some numbers in a minute, but it's not the growth that's the interesting part. It's what a layer does to information passing through it. Because everything you need a customer to know about you right now has to come from that question that they ask this layer. And that layer is a filter. And things get compressed going through this filter. Things get dropped. Things get taken from somebody else's version of you because your page was harder to read. So here's the question that I would like you to ask yourself and answer for yourself. Can your core facts about your brand make it through this filter between the brand and the customer? Because now there are two new kinds of visitors that did not exist just a few years ago. The first one is not a person at all. It's an agent and crawler that arrives and reads and creates conclusions about you and then leave, and then someday they will be doing the shopping and buying. It happens today already, but it's not that big. The second and the more interesting one and the very real one, and you are in this group as well, it's a person. But that person now arrives already briefed because a machine told them what they should think about you. And what you are and what you do before they even loaded your website. And a lot of that deciding whether to buy from you happened in that conversation you were not a part of. Now, neither one of these segments probably shows as a segment in your reporting, but both are real and they're growing. If you look back to when mobile traffic became a thing, when it showed up, we didn't measure that as an average of desktop and mobile. We started segmenting mobile and desktop because those users were different. In this case, the users are equally, if not more different than a user who has not passed through this layer. So we should do that same thing here. These are separate segments and they pose the same question. What does the machine see when it visits your webpage? And what did it tell the human before that human arrived? But let's start with the obvious question, because it's 2026. There's a lot of hype around AI. Does this mean anything in 2026? Is this real? Should I be paying attention to this? I'll say yes because I'm doing the webinar, obviously, but I'll show you some numbers. First of all, Adobe 2026 Q2 AI traffic report. Adobe tracks AI referred traffic to US retailers. This is not agents buying things, by the way. This is AI sending human traffic your way. So people who did their research inside an answer engine and then they click through and then they arrived and they're pre-briefed and they have an opinion already. So the comparison shopping already happened in a place you cannot see on a page you never designed. Maybe they chose you already. They just want to validate what they saw. And in this Adobe report, what they saw this year is, number one, that this segment, this channel grew 393% to US retailers year over year. Sure, started with a small number, but still it's significant growth. The engagement of this segment is up 12%. So people who read something about you when they're talking to their assistant and they come to your website clicking that link, the engagement is up 12% compared to a year ago. Time spent is up 48%. Pages per visitor are up. Revenue is up. Most importantly, the conversion rate of this particular channel compared to all other channels is now 42% higher. It used to be 30 or something percent lower just a year ago. This is real. This is happening, even though Adobe published this in a report that also kind of plugs a tool that helps optimize AI referred traffic. So the numbers may be real. The placement wasn't very honest, but this is how we stand right now. So what's really important to understand about this is that this is human traffic referred to, briefed by, informed by AI. There's also the fully machine traffic. That's a machine doing things on your website, trying to find information, submit forums, whatever. That is a significantly smaller segment right now. It's growing, but those are two different things and they should be treated completely differently. Now, let's look at another number. This came from Cloudflare. Earlier this month, their CFO in annual earnings call, he said that humans will be a rounding error on the internet. And look, this is their CFO and they're selling protection about unauthorized access. So some salt doesn't hurt. But what we do know already is that in June this year, 50%, more than 50% of all requests to HTML pages came from non-human traffic. So this is already happening. And is it all hype? A lot of it is, I'm sure, but a lot of it is not. And how I feel about this is the numbers shared by CFOs or any C-level executives at companies, you should question them. But the direction where this is going is undeniable. There's more machine traffic than ever on the internet, and it's probably as low as it will ever be in the future. So we don't need 1,000 to 1 machines versus humans. If those machines are already here and they're briefing and sending you traffic, human traffic that already converts on your website. So one thing you can do today is make sure you're not blind to this traffic. Are you segmenting this and looking at this as a separate channel in your analytics? Is this AI referred traffic treated as a different group that already has formed opinions, right or wrong, about you before they land on your website? And second, a lot of these visitors, the fully machine automated things, are also hitting your servers and doing things. mixing that traffic with human traffic is a bad idea, and you should do all you can to make sure those are treated separately. So those two things, make sure you're tracking this and make sure you're making a difference between human traffic and non-human traffic. And I know what's coming next. Is experimentation dead? Is testing dead? That's a very popular phrase. And this is a Convert.com webinar. Once again, thank you, Convert, for making this possible. Well, no, absolutely not. Testing and learning from your audience and learning about your product and about your offering, no, absolutely not going away. I think it's more important than ever. But the surface where this is happening is changing. The visual layer where most of the tests historically have run it's still important. It's just that there are other things that are becoming equally important. And then the second, the user you're optimizing for has changed. If every user comes to you with an opinion about the landing page and about the product, it's not the same as someone who clicked an ad and that's the first time they discover you. So the visual layer not disappearing. Humans still land on your pages. They still need to see a good-looking website, but it is losing share. So what passes through is your offer, your pricing, how clearly you stated, the information, the structure, what you actually do instead of how you display it using pixels. Now, the good news for this specific audience is that every one of these surfaces is also something you can test on. So no, absolutely, experimentation is not dead. And one more thing before we go to the poll, talking about why this is a CRO, an experimentation industry problem. It is, but it's not just experimentation, it's just CRO, because everything that these new users are doing is everyone's problem now. If you have a firewall, that firewall will decide if the machine will get through the door and be able to crawl and visit your website at all. That's a security setting. What it can read on your website, whether you will get cited, that's SEO/GEO/AEO, whatever they call it. What it understands, that used to be brand and content. And whether the human it briefed will convert, well, that's CRO. So this is the same visitor in one pipeline across multiple departments, which means there are no more strictly CRO problems. There are no more strictly SEO problems. There are no more strictly accessibility problems, no security problems. This is all one problem that needs to be solved, and the organizational chart is probably a reason why there's nobody working on it just yet. And now we can look at the first poll before we get deeper into this. Do you currently segment AI or agent traffic in your analytics? I just want a simple yes or no. We can talk about in the chat what you're doing with those segments and how you're analyzing them, but I just want to hear if this is on your radar or not. And as you are responding to this question, let's quickly talk about the next part of the webinar. I have a framework I use when I do audits, and I'll talk to the first two pillars of that framework today, and then the second part of the webinar, we'll talk about the other two. So today we're talking about identity and structure as seen by a machine. Essentially, can a machine identify who you are and understand exactly who you are without any doubt? And structure is, can a machine extract information from your website? Which means, can it access the website? Can it access the right pages? Will it get confused? Will it be able to work with the page? Or maybe like that shoe page that I showed you, some information will not be accessible for a machine at all. Let's spend some time talking about identity first. This is the most important thing that a human or a non-human visitor needs to be able to answer. Am I in the right place? Is this what I'm looking for? Will this give me the answers I need? How clear are you making that? Because by the time an AI agent or a crawler or whatever, by the time it reaches your website, it's not meeting you for the first time. It's just checking up on what it already knows. So every answer engine, every agent, they arrive with a picture of your brand already in their mind. That picture is built from training data, from search results, from your LinkedIn page, from your Google business profile, any directory listings, reviews you have online, the press coverage, all of that. Your website does not introduce you to the agent or AI visiting your website. It's just trying to confirm what the machine already knows. And now when we talk about entities and identity online, we have to talk about one thing. The internet for a long time has not been about keywords and strings and text and random pages. It's been about things, about nodes that are interconnected. So your brand is and has been for a long time an entity that has a lot of small entities attached to it. Somewhere in Google's knowledge graph or in Wikidata or any of those systems that connect different nodes, there's the structured layers that are attached to your brand. There's that node, there's the name, there are the products attached to it, there's the founders, the prices, all the relationships within the company and all the relationships your company has with other companies. It's all hanging off that main node, and that node needs to be strong. So when a machine is trying to answer a question about you, it's reading that node plus whatever else it can confidently attach to it. The real question beneath all of that, beneath the identity pillar, is how solid are you making that node? You can check what LLMs and what AI systems are telling about you. Go back to Adidas. Did I say Adidas? Adidas as the example. It's so weird to pronounce that company name because there's an American way to do it, there's a European, there's a Serbian way. But you know what I mean, because everybody knows what I mean when I say that, because Adidas is a strong brand. It's a fortress online. Ask any machine, ask almost any human on the planet what they are, what they do, what they know about them, and they'll get most of those things right. We're not that. I'm not that. You're not that. The smaller your node is, the smaller your brand is, the smaller your entity's footprint is, the thinner that information gets, and the harder it gets for a machine to lean on whatever scraps it can find online. For example, if your name is ambiguous, or you're not using the same name everywhere, or your name is rented from somebody else's node entirely, if you named your company about a band or a city or a place or a common word, you need to check whether machines can clearly identify what they know about you and what they think about you before anything else. This is a very simple 30-second test with any LLM. Just ask, what do you know about X? And don't give them hints. Try to see if that entity is strong enough. The good news is strengthening your node and strengthening your entity online it's not easy, but it's simple. And the work you need to do, that's the boring, the non-glamorous work I was referring to earlier. So you can start by doing one of these things. Number one, check the organization schema on your website. But don't just look if the plugin you installed, if you're using WordPress or even Shopify, whatever else, don't just check if they're outputting the site name and everything. Just try to make that information as rich as possible. Of course, schema alone will not get you over the top, but Google and Microsoft have both said publicly, representatives of Google and Microsoft have both said publicly that schema is used to understand the website. So why not help them? This is you explicitly telling a machine what you are and what in all the detail you can imagine. So if you have same as defined, same as profiles in your schema on the homepage, make sure you list every single surface you control online. Make sure your LinkedIn profile is listed there. Make sure your Crunch page, make sure your X page, Twitter, not Twitter, X, whatever, Facebook, Instagram, whatever else you have, make sure they're all listed, they're all connected. And make sure that on those surfaces you control, that you are explicitly telling a machine, this is also us. Don't confuse that for a different entity. Just make it, merge it all into one thing. You use the same spelling, you use the same words, you say it's the same taglines, the same description of what you do, the same description of markets you serve, who you do your job for, all that stuff. It needs to be consistent. It needs to show up everywhere, because if you're not consistent, that leaves room for hallucination, and that is catastrophic. Okay. And the last one, just confirm what trusted sources say about you already. So maybe there was an article in a major publication about you. Maybe there's a Wikidata entry about you that you're not aware of. Just make sure that all that, and a simple Google search to surface all of that. Find all the surfaces where you have a "this is them" page, and make sure that that information is correct and confirms what you say on your website. None of this is cool. None of this is exotic. This is you explicitly telling machines in a way they can understand that you exist, that this is what you do, and that all of these properties you have online are one thing, and you're telling them what that thing is. And that is the foundation of everything that happens after. And it's extremely important, and I believe it's going to get even more important as we go. Why do I say that? Well, just 2.5 months ago, there was a case that kind of made some noise in Europe. I'm not sure how it went outside of Europe, but basically in Germany, a court found Google liable for false information that harmed the brand they were talking about in Google AI overviews. So what happened? Someone tried to ask about a company, and Google AI overviews says that they're involved with some scammy practices in the past or something like that. The judge ruled that Google is generating that. This is not the same as a list of 10 results and then you can go and read them. This is Google writing about your company. This means that Google is liable because they made this information or made up this information. These companies like Google and all the LLMs, if they are guilty for coming up with false information and giving false information to a user who is researching whatever, if they can be sued and they have to pay, trust becomes even more of an issue. Trust becomes more than just a nice thing that's confirming what they already think. Trust becomes a factor in showing you or not showing you at all. I'm not saying there's a trust score or anything like that that is going to disqualify you for being displayed and cited and shown in an answer. Nobody can prove that. What we do know is something that Google has been insisting on for, I don't know if it's a decade or close to a decade. It has been EEAT. And that's experience, expertise, authoritativeness, I barely pronounce that, and trustworthiness. So EEAT, trustworthiness is the last one. So the trust factor is right there. And this is not new. This is something that's been in Google's quality rater guidelines. And that's a manual for the contractors they have, human contractors, who look at the search results and then look at the results as they're ranking, and they score them on these 4. They don't press a button and punish you immediately because some human reviewer said so, but what those reviewers say affects the algorithm in the future. So if, let's say, they find that the first result on a certain search is not trustworthy, a person will just flag that, and then the algorithm will get that input, and next time it will change and demote that result. So trust has always been a factor online, even with a human involved in the entire flow. Now, when the human is not there, it becomes even more important, because this was 10 years ago. This was a Google question talking about, should humans trust this? And there's a human, humans can figure it out. Humans can say that, okay, the first result is a complete scam, and that's bad from Google. When there's no human in this flow, when the assistant is doing all the reading and everything, it becomes even more important, because a machine cannot judge whether you are trustworthy until it has resolved your entity and understood exactly who you are. So those things are so connected. And how do you know that what you're saying and what your website is saying is something that should be trusted? Well, look at these questions and just ask yourself, are those clear on my website? Let's say you have a reference article about a certain topic that you may or may not be an expert at on your website. If that article doesn't say who the author is, who the people behind the article are, if it doesn't explain the website, it's just a random website you put up with hundreds and hundreds of programmatic articles just to get some rankings, that does not provide any value to anyone. So who says this is extremely important. This needs to be clear. This needs to be clear to humans and clear to machines reading the website as well. The second one is, when was this true? And you don't have to explicitly say published on this date or edited on this date, but let's say you have a blog post or an article on your website writing about your pricing from 4 years ago, and you change your pricing 3 times in the meantime. How do you indicate to a machine learning about you and summarizing you for a human? How do you tell them that this is old? And the third one is, does the rest of the world agree with what they're saying? You cannot only work with your website anymore. That has changed. That's never coming back. So what your human readable page says Does it agree with the schema you have? Does it agree with all the profiles that I mentioned earlier? Your Google profile, a directory somewhere, someone writing about you, or you have a phone number that stopped working 5 years ago and you still have it listed somewhere. Those are small, those are tiny, but those all matter and they all add up to a messy picture a machine will have about your brand before it says anything to the human. So try to fix those and try to be as consistent and as clear about this as possible. And if you want to have a way to find out how machines are learning about you, what they know about you, what they tell others about you, don't just jump into prompt tracking. It's fine. You can do that if you want. It's useful in some cases. But before you do that, just try to understand what these systems know about you and tell about you. So maybe you can start by asking, what do you know about this brand? And see what comes out. Does it even identify you as a brand by the name, or does it get confused because the name is vague or not known enough? If it doesn't know you, that's the first problem you have to solve. Second, if it gives a response, where does that information come from? Because some of that will come from your website, some of that will come from your surfaces. Maybe it'll be Reddit. ChatGPT has a love-hate relationship with Reddit. It just goes up and down in the number of times it's cited. Maybe it's going to be a YouTube video. It could be anything. Create a list of where the information about your brand is coming from. Your products, your brand, your founders, whatever is core to your business. Are those sources correct? That's the third question you need to ask. Look at every single one. And another extremely important question is, and maybe you should start with this, can AI even reach your version of the story or your page on your website? Because sometimes, well, I'll talk about this in the third part of today's webinar structure, but sometimes maybe you're just blocking crawlers. Maybe you're blocking AI completely with or without even knowing. Or sometimes maybe the information that you want them to have, like me wanting to see the size availability for that shoe, maybe that is not even going to be something that a machine can read in the first place. And the reason this is so important, obviously, is this thing at the bottom. Gemini is AI and can make mistakes. Your job when you're trying to define, preserve, and make your identity clear is to prevent LLMs from hallucinating about you. The more clear you are, the more you repeat things using the same words everywhere, easier it becomes to understand what your entity is about. So there's some homework for you from this section of the webinar. It will take you no more than a few minutes. Ask 2 LLMs, 3 or whatever, just not one because you want to have different sources, who you are, what you sell, what the pricing is, what kind of market you serve, all those things. And you probably notice you have these answers in your head, but they're scattered across the internet. They're implied. They're not directly stated anywhere. Ask an LLM all those things and capture not only the answers, not only the generated paragraphs of text, but also the citations. Where did information came from? And then if something is wrong, this is where you get started. This is how you start correcting the wrong picture that LLMs have and then share with humans. Everything so far has been the boring detail work that should have been done a long time ago, yes, but it's more important right now because these machines and AI, they can read multiple things at the same time and they gather information from different places. So flipping up in one place could cost you everything else. So identity work, treat it with all the respect your brand deserves. But the second pillar, the structure, this is where it gets interesting. Because the question is not only if the AI crawler, agent, training bot, whatever, not only if it can read your page and access your page, and I'll talk about that and the access control and a different kind of AI user agents. It's not only if it can reach the page in the first place, it's what it can see the page. Because a fully rendered version of a page with all the bells and whistles, like that shoe page that has the sizing that I showed you earlier, that's what a human sees. What a machine gets to read depends on what the machine is. So let's take a look at what that means, what it means for a machine to read your website, because it's different things for different machines, obviously. But essentially, There are 3 ways AI and AI agents can see your website. The first way AI will read your pages and AI agents will read your pages is by reading document object model and the accessibility tree. Accessibility tree is a simplified semantic version of your entire page. This is the version of the page that the screen readers have used for decades now. All the names, roles, states are there. This is not inferred. This is directly stated in the document, in the accessibility tree. If you look at something like Microsoft Playwright, which is the most commonly used, the most standard tool for browser automation, it provides accessibility snapshots rather than screenshots because those are cheaper and the choice to use them usually comes down to price and speed. The second one is visual, and that's screenshots. So the AI agent will take a screenshot of the page, have a question, what should I do here? Help me figure out where to click, send it to the LLM, gets back the coordinates where the click should happen, and it's screenshot, reason, act, screenshot, reason, act. And you can tell already this is going to be a lot more expensive and a lot slower. So if the point of an AI agent is to make things faster, to automate things, to just be more productive than humans, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, the third method, obviously, is the hybrid method where the default would be the cheaper one, but when it gets confused, it goes to accessibility tree and tries to figure it out, to screenshot, not accessibility tree, and tries to figure out what to do using that. And I will show you this on a web page in just a bit. First of all, I want to talk to you about another thing, and this has been a problem for a very long time, but now that we have all these new companies that are crawling the internet, trying to figure out what the internet is about, and save money while they're doing it, which means they're not rendering and running JavaScript and they're just relying on your HTML, this becomes more of a problem. This is something that I did as a study a few months ago. I want to just share that page with you. Just bear with me for a second. So what I did was I found a list of top 300 fintech companies published by CNBC for 2025. And I looked at how much of the content that they're delivering in the initial page, initial fetch, without rendering all the JavaScript and loading JavaScript. And the numbers are interesting. 36% of them deliver less than 80% of their homepage content in raw HTML, 20% less than 30% of content without JavaScript, and 47 of those websites, so 17%, they give you no content if JavaScript is not being executed. You saw the shoe product page. When I ask Claude or Gemini about it, it doesn't render JavaScript. It just gets me back whatever is there without the JavaScript running, which usually means div ID root and then whatever React decides to put in there, the 5 megabyte bundle that's going to render the page. This is not good because all of that information you had and that someone who is researching you is going to depend on is not going to reach them unless they visit your website. And if they're just discovering about your brand from an LLM, they're not going to even go there. They're not even going to hear about you because the LLM would just skip you. This is interesting because for decades, we relied on delivering a web page that someone's going to look at. There was always accessibility, but not enough people cared about it. We relied on that user being patient enough and having a good enough screen, having a device, mobile, desktop, whatever, and just waiting for that to load and looking at it, analyzing it visually, and then making a decision based on that. Now we need to deliver the meaning in a different way. And if there's a good comparison to make here, it's French fries. I just wanted to put myself on top of French fries and I thought it would look cooler than it does, but bear with me, okay? Think about what French fries are. You go to a counter for decades. You go to a counter, you buy the French fries. They're fresh, they're crispy, they're all that, they're soft inside. You know what I'm talking about. With the delivery apps in the late 2010s, the French fries are getting delivered, which means they need to be prepared in a way that's going to survive that delivery because there's nothing more gross than soggy French fries. There's an entire industry about preventing the fries from getting soggy in delivery. There are different boxes, there's all kinds of things. Your website, your content of your website is the fries. It's engineered, it's created to be consumed one way. With all the layout, the hierarchy, the colors, the design system, all of that. It's designed, and the only way that it has been designed for decades has been that way. Now, all that information that you want to pass through the visual layer of your website has to survive the absence of that visual layer. The same way French fries have to survive a 20-minute trip without getting soggy. And that requires a different approach. What do you do if most of your content or too much of your content is not visible for that machine? Now, the one thing you can do, and I'll show you this in an example in a second, just make the content always visible, because when you have the collapsible elements, all that stuff, yeah, it's in the page, even if it's not loaded with JavaScript, it's in the page, but in the accessibility tree, if the element is hidden from view, that means it should not be shown to the accessibility tree because it's not a visible element. I'll show you what that looks like in a page in a second. Number 2, server-side render every page that matters, ideally everything on your website. Don't use client-side rendering. It's nice when you have, single-page applications, when you have a lot of interactivity, but for a website that's content-driven, that relies on being consumed by not only humans, but also machines, just server-side render or pre-render, or have your entire website statically generated, which is the best thing you can do if you are not making constant changes, if the website is more of a static thing. If you have a blog or a content website, this might be the best way. And if you have to do dynamic rendering, if you cannot do server-side rendering for everything, just try to make sure that the machines get the full HTML delivered and not added to the page with some JavaScript or anything else. So if humans can wait, the machines don't have to. Of course, that's not the ideal way, but sometimes that is the only way to do it, and it could be acceptable. Now, what's not on this list? Redesigning and fully rebuilding your website. That is usually not necessary, because some content not being there because JavaScript just didn't fire or was not even supposed to fire. It's not a platform issue. It's just a poor decision, and it can be solved easily. So let me show you what that looks like in a real page that I showed you earlier. And if you look at this page, and pardon my dev tools on the right, if you're not familiar, this is the Chrome dev tools. This is where you can see a lot more about the page from behind that visual layer. You open that, and you can see the entire DOM of the page, which is cool, which is important. And I want to show you this one. This is the description of the product right here on the left. That's the collapsible panel. Description, and then below description, this is obviously not visible, but the entire, and you can see the blue boxes, which is where this description would go if I open this panel. I'm not going to open it, but it shows the description here on the right, and you can see all of that. Now, if I click the show accessibility tree, which is what Playwright would get, which is what screen readers would get, which is what a lot of agents that are built on Playwright or Playwright MCP would get. And I look at that same element, description, because its content, the content of this panel is hidden by default. It's not expanded. It's not in. It's ignored from the accessibility tree, which means there's a certain category of users that are not going to get it. And there's also the size buttons, there's all that kind of stuff, everything that I showed you earlier. So the visual layer of this page is completely and absolutely fine for someone. Now, you can have your take on these collapsible panels, saving space, all that stuff. But if I want to read all 4, do I have to click them one by one and just deal with the page? Yeah, we don't have to talk about that today. So the visual layer of the page is just fine. And then the accessibility tree and something that's supposed to describe this product is not in that layer for simple reason of this not being visible on the page. And I'll just add a detail from the 1 million study from WebAIM. It was published earlier this year. They look at the top 1 million web pages, home pages, top million websites in the world. They check them all for accessibility errors. And 2026 is the first report after a few years where the number of accessibility errors has gone up. And I guess that has to do with the vibe coded websites. So if you're doing that, just make sure that the machine that's helping you build the website can also read the website, in case that's what you need. If you're just building a throwaway website, do whatever you want. It's fine. But just make sure that it's done properly. And let's talk about what these user agents, what these machines that we are dealing with that are not Googlebot, that are something new, what they are. Well, first of all, we have training crawlers. And these are the crawlers that fetch content from the internet, and then it's used to train the next generation of LLMs. Now we have the search and retrieval crawlers, which, they build indexes that AI search products answer from. We have user-triggered fetchers, and that's when you go to Claude and type in something and it fetches a page like I did in those early examples in this webinar. That's what they are. And then you have user AI agents that browse and act independently or sent by a human, and then they do their thing, but they're not directly triggered to fetch a certain page. And the fifth kind is just liars. They tell you they are something they're not. We have a lot of those happening online, and it will be interesting to monitor what they can and cannot do. And all of this means that you have not one, but 4 different decisions to make with how you're dealing with access and letting these crawlers and bots and agents access your website. The first decision is the training crawlers. Now, should you let ChatGPT learn from your content and then teach the next generation of its model and use that in its training data? There's a strong argument to make both ways, pro and con, but letting them in puts you in the model's memory, and you might stay there for a long time, including in answers that cite no one. They're just fetched from the training data, and there's no citation to fetch. There's no URL to fetch. You're just the source of truth. It's just burnt in. That's how you stay there for a while until there's a new model and you're out. But keeping them out, keeping the training crawlers out, is also a stance about your content being someone else's raw material and not being okay with that. So if you're a publisher, if your business is about content, you might think of this as a licensing position, but whatever you choose, make sure that you make your own decision. Now, my take is that for most websites, this is fine unless content is your business model. And this is the only one of 4 of these that I think there's disagreement and reasonable disagreement in what people are doing and how they're approaching it. Now, the second decision you need to make is the retrieval crawlers. This is the crawler building the index that AI search answers will come from. If you block that, you will not appear in AI search results and citations. So for most businesses, this is an easy decision to make. This is something that you have to allow, so allow it and allow these crawlers to stay with you. The third decision to make is the user-triggered fetches. So someone types in something about you in Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT, and then that agent goes to your website to look and get information from your website. This is not a crawler doing this at its own pace, at its own schedule. This is a customer, a human being asking about you in real time, and that agent is seen as extension of that customer. So I don't think there's a good reason to block these for now, but you make your own decisions, okay? Now, decision 4, it's agents. These are machines that browse and act independently, more or less. And I will talk more about these in the second part of this webinar in a few weeks. And then, the fifth category I mentioned, the impersonators. This is just, well, something we have to deal with online. This is not a decision. This is something that should be enforced. And if some crawler is pretending to be something it's not, well, it should not be allowed to access your website. Simple rule. Now, how do you block each one of these categories? Let's talk about that. The first way, and the most traditional way, this is how we did it for years and decades, just simple robots.txt. And this is the thing that Googlebot has been listening to, and BingBot and all those more honorable traditional bots and crawlers have been listening to over decades. You just list the paths it's not allowed to access on your website, and that's it. And it's going to listen. This doesn't always work. There was a case a few years ago where Perplexity was caught ignoring the fact that it was told to not access a certain website. So robots.txt, the way you should think about it is almost like a please don't sign that whoever is sending that crawler can honor or not. Second one is CDN level or web application firewall. This is what Cloudflare does. And look at the rules there, because This one can actually do some blocking. This is not something like robots.txt where they can just ignore it. Now, layer 3, and this is something that is even more serious and stronger, it's simple verification, which means confirming that something claiming to be a given crawler actually comes from that vendor. This is the one layer that can block everything, including that category 5 of pretending crawlers. How does it do that? Well, it checks the IP address, it checks the user agent string, and just makes sure that this is who it says it is. Now that layer 2, the web application firewall, there's a trap there. There's risks involved because this can bite you back. Because if you block too bluntly at the network level, and then the crawlers cannot even read your robots.txt at all, they cannot follow the rules that you set there. So be careful about this. Cloudflare has been more and more strict about giving access to these AI user agents lately, and just be careful about what happens there. And I want to give you an example. There was a study in July by a company that looked at 1,000 websites and then read each one's robots.txt and then sent a real crawler to see what the server actually did. And roughly 1 in 6 welcomed the crawler in the robots.txt file, but then returned a 403, which means blocked it when it tried to access. Which means the published policy in robots.txt, the traditional way of doing it, said, yes, you can access the website, but the firewall rule is just preventing that access. And either way is fine. Blocking or allowing crawlers is fine as long as this is a conscious decision. There was another one. By a UK company. They crawled a couple of thousand websites. In one of the most recent reports, they noticed that 8 in 10 websites had nothing in robots.txt about AI crawlers at all. So not blocking them, not allowing them, just nothing, absolutely nothing. And then fewer than 2% had written a rule to let them in deliberately. And remember, this is robots.txt. This is a text file that blocks nothing. It says nothing about the firewall, but it shows intent. It shows what your decision was. So when you ask who decides your machine visibility, I still believe that for most companies, the honest answer is either nobody or whatever their platform they're hosting, Edge, network CDN, whatever it is, decided. And that's fine if you're happy with what their defaults are. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to look at these two things. Open your robots.txt file and read it and look what it says. Just check what it's telling all these different callers and bots and agents. And then look at your CDN, look at your firewall rules and see what they say. And just put those two side by side and find out if they say the same thing. And then maybe look at your logs, or have your developer look at your logs, have your DevOps person look at the logs and tell you which agents and which crawlers are actually visiting your website and which paths they're visiting, because that will tell you what's at stake before you make any changes there. What do I want you to learn from this part of the webinar? Your tested layout, what you're showing, the pixel you're displaying, that's not what matters. That's not going to survive every interaction with every visitor your website has, but the information that's being passed does, if you structure it the right way. Design, it's built to persuade humans and get humans to buy, to do something you want them to do. Structure is what the machines need. So it's not the same thing. They can coexist, but they're not the same thing. So if your message, if your core product information, if your core brand message only works inside your design, as part of your design, you do not have a message that's strong enough. And you need to have one, because we have both kinds of visitors now. We have human audience, and we have audience that is a machine that's going to display that information somewhere else for the human to see. So homework, it's just a few minutes. Fetch your own homepage without a browser tonight, or just kill JavaScript in your browser and look at your homepage. Is there anything that's not shown? And then ask whoever owns your CDN settings in your organization to show you what that list is, what's blocked, what's accessible, because maybe you're working on a website and then the user that's discovering you this new way through a machine is not able to see pages on your website because someone decided to block them without letting you know. It's not easy work. You don't have to do this every day. You don't have to do this every week or every month, but just have a good idea of all the things you're working on your website, how far does that information travel? And now let's look at a few demos you have submitted. There's some really interesting websites. I want to show you some cool examples. So let's dig into that. And finally, let's go through the websites you submitted for this webinar. There are 5 total websites, and I will just run through each one, share one or maybe 2 findings for each one, and then we are going to conclude this and we have time for Q&A. The first website was submitted by Kelly Wardham. If you don't know who Kelly is, come on. Anyway, the website is Missouri Jobs with Justice. It's built on WordPress, uses a page builder inside WordPress. First of all, server side loaded fully because it's WordPress, so that's what you get from a strong foundation and a strong platform. This is a fully machine readable website. The second thing is, and all of the crawlers and all the bots seem to be able to access the website except for CloudBot. I tried all of them, but CloudBot is the one that's a problem. It seems that it's blocked. Now, if this was a decision, if you know why you're blocking CloudBot, if this is really what's happening, if it's a decision you made, go for it. If not, just check what is happening here. Because maybe you don't want CloudBot looking at your website, but maybe you do. So I would just look into that. Website number 2 is ipanemaflapflop.hu, a Hungarian e-commerce website by András Kopsa. Happens to be a good friend. So if you're here on the webinar, Andy, hey, looking forward to seeing you soon. This is a very strong website. And I want to talk about schema here because it's really good. Schema, if you go look at the product page, I'll just show you one of the products here. Let me open source. And if you look at their schema, and I'll try to zoom this in a little bit so the font is larger, it shows in schema, in structured data, it shows inventory level. I'm guessing this is dynamically updated the same way it's updated on the page, which is not always the case, or it's not even displayed inside schema. So I think this is a really good example of a relatively small local market brand doing very well, better than a lot of the global ones. Next submission is Fidelity Bank. This is a community bank. It has a lot of branches, 23 branches. This is a WordPress website with Yoast. Just like any other WordPress website, is good. Server-side rendering is good. What I found here on this website is that all of the branch locations show the same markup in schema. So while there's a correct address here, you can see it 101 North Blakely Street, Dunmore, PA 18512. But if you look at schema, it's always going to be this Scranton address, which I guess is the headquarters, but it will be good to show in the schema in these location pages their own locations, their own contact details. But I want to show you something. This is a case of not giving access to the right content to the right engines. So if I go to Claude and ask what the privacy policy of this company is, and this is the link to their privacy policy page, I'll show you what it looks like. It's a very long, very detailed privacy policy. Probably covers everything it needs to cover. Now, what Claude told me is that it cannot read this because the body of the privacy policy is injected by JavaScript. And instead, it found a different page. And that different page is this FAQ 10. I'll show you what that looks like. It's talking about privacy, so Claude was able to figure out and find an alternate path. I don't speak the language, so I don't understand what the page says, but I asked in my follow-up, I basically asked what this page says and how it's wrong compared to the other one. The privacy policy it wasn't able to read is dated to July 17, 2026, and the FAQ page, the one it was able to read, is dated 2020. So this is where, with a human in the loop, the LLM will probably alert you, the agent will probably flag something, not necessarily, but probably will. Without a human in the loop, this can go wrong so many ways, simply because this page just depends on JavaScript injection for all the content. And then the final websites by dear local friends here, Jose and Pedro, Caximedia. This is an agency, it's a WordPress/SEO. They do all kinds of things for clients. They've been doing it for a long time. The nicest people you will ever meet. I guarantee that. And they submitted their website. So this was very interesting. The website is, of course, it's WordPress. It uses rank math, I believe, and hosted on Kinsta hosting. behind Cloudflare. It's a Portuguese website. And you know what? These guys know what they're doing. I'm sorry, Jose. Sorry, Pedro. I'm not able to help you here. You guys are doing a great job already. And that's it for today.
Well, Sunny, this is pretty good. Lots of great insights. I'm taking lots of notes, and we have a couple of questions. The first one from Daniel. Should websites stop using JS to create websites altogether?
Yeah, it really depends on what create websites is. If what is being served in the browser without JavaScript running is not enough, it's not a real website, then yeah, I would say stop using JavaScript. And how we got into this situation where everything is so JavaScript driven is also very weird. It started with, I believe, with Backbone.js, which was the first SPA single page application framework in 2010 or something. Then we got Angular and React. And we got a whole generation of developers where it was easy to use these components and easier to, like, developer experience was so important. And then when you give someone a hammer, and this was a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So this was used for everything. It was intended to be used for applications, dynamic applications with dashboards, with login, where things are changing. It was never intended to be used for real websites that are not applications. So if my take is if a website does not deliver all the content without JavaScript, you've seen what I've done with Claude and Gemini when I tried to find the sizing availability for the shoes. If that information doesn't pass through, of course, this was just me prompting it. I'll go and find the shoes. But when you're researching 10 different products and creating a short list, if 4 of them don't give you anything, they're not going to be in that final report. And if you work for one of those 4 companies, you're losing that opportunity to sell to that customer who's using and who's not using an LLM to research products these days. So should websites stop using JavaScript to create websites? JavaScript to create websites, absolutely 100%. Should they completely stop using JavaScript? No, but it should be used for what it was intended to be used for. And then the second question Daniel had, because it's part of the same question, so I'll just read it and answer. Can websites still use JavaScript, but also load a structured schema with the key data that the agent can read for price, size? Yes, if you cannot do better than that. So it's better than nothing, absolutely. But if what is shown in the page does not match to what's behind the scenes, the trust issue that I talked about, I think there's only one absolutely correct way of doing this. And the reason why I think it's so important in 2026, all of these, everyone always, when you ask them, should websites be accessible? Yes. Is your website accessible? Well, we'll get to that. All those things that we should have cared about, but they were not important enough, they can now cause damage that you don't even know where it's going to come from. And that's why fixing all these small, stupid technical issues is so important in 2026 and even more important moving forward. So you should talk to Jono, who's a very famous technical SEO guy, and ask him about JavaScript frameworks. Just ping him on LinkedIn, send him I sent you. Tell him I sent you.
Thank you, Sunny. This is great.
Yeah.
I'm
There was one
personally
more.
curious. I'm personally curious about a question, which is, if someone has an hour to make their website more AI ready, what would you recommend they start with?
The thing I did here at the beginning of the webinar, just kill JavaScript and load your page. Because I'm pretty sure that marketing people and marketing teams and CRO teams and all did never try that, or almost never try that. Even developers never try to kill JavaScript and then test the website if it works or it doesn't. And no, JavaScript meant years ago that you have a class of users that are just not going to have JavaScript, and that's like 0.1%, 1%, and you can live without those users. Accessibility still an issue because screen readers and JavaScript, that don't always mix. But now every single one of these fetchers, every single one of these, Claude user, ChatGPT user, Google agent, the ones that you trigger in the chat and they go and do something, you saw that they don't literally say, I don't see JavaScript. That's a problem. And that's something that has to be solved if that's how people discover you. And increasingly, people are discovering everything through this.
That's correct. And based on that, Tara is saying that's why we have MD version markdowns for website pages, so it can be easily read and understood.
I want to say something about that.
Agents and bots, please.
Yeah, I have my thoughts that I'm not going to share in full. We can, it was Tara, right? Send me a LinkedIn message. We can book a call and talk because I want to talk to you about this. I would love to have a chat about this. My take on this, there's Google's take, which basically says, what the hell? My take on this is, oh, we messed up HTML so bad. We need to start fresh with something that we can manage. And who's going to make sure those are in sync? And when an agent or an LLM is reading the markdown page, is it supposed to trust that the HTML says the same thing? Or and like MD cloaking, markdown cloaking is a thing. Who's going to maintain all of that? Also, it strips all the meaning and all the action and all the context if you just give it like a flat text file. Because a form disappears there. It cannot do anything. It just read a flat description of what your page is. So another thing is check your logs. Is anybody reading those files if you have them? That's the best place to start. There's another question that just came in from Julie.
Well said. So yeah, Julie's asking, why do you think Meta's bot is frequently spiking our website direct traffic?
Julie, as much as I would love to be able to answer that, poking into Zuckerberg's brain is not safe. And then I say, don't do it. And I did some digging around what Meta does in other companies as well, in terms of how often they crawl websites, crawl web pages, and how much they send traffic back. MetaBot is the most useless piece of, I'm not going to say what, on the internet, and block it and don't let them have anything. That is my personal opinion. This is literally the worst offender when it comes to all the crawls and all the bots. They just crawl, read, and never send anything back. So why they do that? I guess they're trying to build an LM because they're late to the party and now they have to work harder. That complete guess, but maybe that's what's happening. I would just block it immediately because it's blocked on my website. So yeah.
That's correct. And she's setting a comment that it has found its way past their SDN settings.
Which kind of tells you how ethical that company is. Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, Sunny, thanks so much for sharing all the insights. You really made the topic much more easier to understand. Any final words you want to say?
Yeah, just what you see when you look at your website is not what the rest of the world will see. Like that, this is one mindset that has to be adopted moving forward, because that we've always started every website with the design. That's not valid anymore. You have to think about what your core message is, designing that, what your brand identity is, designing that, keeping that in some centralized document that's going to feed your website and everything else you do online. It gets easier once you do that. But I'm not saying designers don't matter. I would never say that. There's a few people who would kill me if I said that. That layer doesn't matter as much as it used to when you look at the whole picture.
Thanks again, Sunny. It was really insightful. And yeah, from the entire team of Convert, thanking everyone for their time here. And don't forget, this is part one, two-part masterclass. So we'll dive deeper into the topic next time. And yeah, with that said, wishing everyone great rest of the day and see you soon.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.